Good evening. I'm Susan Jacobus. I live at 1805 North D Street here in Fremont, Nebraska. Last meeting, Lottie Mitchell spoke of the LB 840 funding, and she gave kind of a long history lesson in it, and a few things were lost along the way. LB 840 was approved by the voters. It did arrive on the horizon in 2011. And part of that, by state statute, a citizen advisory review committee had to be formed. It allowed for vetting of these funding so that one entity, one source, perhaps mayor or perhaps a body on the council, weren't the only ones making the decision. These decisions were to be vetted. So when LB 840 funds are given out, you as councilmen are assured that there's been vetting, that it wasn't a decision by a mayor or by a city administrator or other body. So this vetting process is two-stage. It goes to the Citizens Advisory Review first, and then it goes through a local option review. And that's called vetting. So that before it's considered at the council level, you know that it's been through vetting process by two different entities. One entirely made up of citizens, and then another which does include a councilman or two, as well as business people, so that they all know it is for the best fit for the benefit of Fremont. And along that line, the pledging of $975,000 plus of LB 840 funds, CDBG grants for the purchase of the land occurred on Tech Park. And along that line, other monies were invested, other things were done to improve that property. And now that the sale of the land is occurring, something got lost along the wayside, and nobody has asked why there was no vetting of the rebate of sorts of this fund that's supposed to either go back to the state or to your LB 840 funding. This rebate didn't go through a vetting process. This decision wasn't made unilaterally by the council. It wasn't brought to you. It was just a decision done. So that as property is sold, you start giving back this money to those that are purchasing the property. But at what cost? And in some of the information that Lottie gave, the land itself is over $73,000 for that acre. You're selling this at $20,000, and from what I can see, it's now at $25,000 an acre by the time the rebate is all done, that you're giving away. This, again, never went through any vetting. Your citizens did not review this like they would as if they were giving that money out. And Lottie spoke very well and gave a lot of detail, which was much appreciated. She's very versed in the LB 840 funding. But again, this did not go through a vetting process. This was not a decision that you made unilaterally as a council, nor did our prior council make this decision. Where did that decision come from? And why was there no decision made, or why was this not funneled through the proper vetting channels? Something you might want to ask yourself. This is LB 840 fund. If the state doesn't take it back, it is supposed to go back to the LB 840 fund. Lottie had also said, as Brian supported it, that we had no committed funds left, no uncommitted funds left, and that this was just part of what LB 840 does. Well, each individual would go through a vetting process. Do they need the money? What is it intended for? And how does it fit within the realm of Fremont? We're selling off property, which is good, but at what cost? This is a vetting process, and that vetting process is there for a purpose, and somehow it got sidelined, and it wasn't done. And the other comment I want to make regards the city versus Dodge County Humane Society. I did sit in the back of that courtroom for that little snippet of time. Mr. Newton was there with our city attorney, Travis, and Tommy Thompson was there, the opposing attorney. The briefs are due April 30th. Please pay attention to how those briefs come back. There is a long history of decisions made for Dodge County Humane Society's structure and the sale of that. That was not given to the council. And part of that, there was some misconduct that possibly occurred when it came to removal of evidence or destruction of evidence of some of the occurrence for what the animal control or the advisory board would have had at their hand. That was not given. Our administrator, our assistant administrator, and our attorney knew full well of it, but yet it was not given to the animal advisory group when they were having consideration if there was any foul play by Dodge County Humane Society, when you had consideration of the contract. Thank you.
Thank you. Again, this is open public comment from now until 7 o'clock. Gives the opportunity for up to 5 minutes to speak on any item that's not on the agenda. If you are on Zoom, just raise your hand. I will call on you. If you're in the chambers, please come and sign in. There's also comment cards in the back as well. Good evening. Can we do that in open public? I don't think we can receive these in open public comment, but. Yeah, we can't take any action in this open public comment. Yeah, you just to drop them off in our mailboxes or just leave them here. Yeah.
Paul Von Buren, 2046 East 30th, Fremont. I'll drop these off in your mailboxes. And moral of the story is there are really times I get tired of hearing myself complain. And there comes a point when you have to actually do some legwork to see if what you're saying is true. Last summer during the campaign, as I was running for council, it was interesting. If you haven't walked your wards lately or spent much time in them, it's worth it. Because it doesn't take too long to see that we have a lot of our city that's in somewhat of a decline. And for years, I kept asking the question, so our focus is on jobs and growth, but what's happening to the people? And I could never get an answer. And I finally decided, well, okay, if you're going to ask a question, you might want to do some of the legwork yourself. So what's on there is pretty simple to understand. I'll leave these, but there are two graphs on here. Because as we talk about jobs and growth, number one, we say we need to bring in people, more people to pay the taxes. We need to add businesses so we have more property that's bringing in more revenue to tax. And we also have to bring in better jobs that will enable people to pay their way through the community, et cetera. So I took Nebraska Department of Revenue data and IRS data, and I actually did it twice, because you know what can be done with numbers and confusion. So I went through them twice, but I wish you could see this, because the top graph simply is what's happened to Fremont in the last 10 years. In the last 10 years, we want to bring in people to pay taxes, but we've grown our population by 5%. In the last 10 years, we want to bring in more taxable property, but if you really look at it's a very straight line. All this really happened is we have inflated the value of people's homes without a corresponding increase in revenue. And so the value of homeowners is basically shouldering the tax burden. We want to bring in better jobs. That's, if you could see it, that's that blue line. That's up about 25%. That kept up with inflation. So we have not truly on average brought in better jobs for the city as a whole. But the one that's somewhat astounding, where incomes have gone up 25%, property taxes have gone up 42%. I understand the argument. The city only spends roughly what, 20% of property taxes. But keep in mind that the decisions that you make here drive people, they drive streets, they drive improvements, they drive TIF funding, they drive the schools. Basically, the decisions that are made here regarding jobs and business drive just about everything else. In fact, probably in excess of 80% of everything that drives our taxes. So the pushback was, as I talked to people, was, okay, but we need to be more like Columbus. Look at how they've grown. So I took the exact same numbers, and those are on the bottom graph. And I said, okay, what really has happened to Columbus? Well, number one, their population has grown by 6%. They haven't brought in enough people to share the burden. Their property tax compared to our 23% has gone up about 40%. So they're adding some, at least business property, to share the tax burden. But their tax was, while our taxes per person have gone up by 35%, theirs have gone up by 43%. The average Columbus taxpayer is paying more in property taxes than the average Fremont taxpayer after all their growth. And when you look at property taxes, ours are up by 42%, but theirs have gone up 52%. My point in all of this is for years, we've used jobs and growth as the measure for what we're doing. I keep asking the question, what about the people? If these numbers are true, I will gladly help you try to prove them wrong, because if they are wrong, we need to show that, because we need a measure of what we're doing with this community. If these numbers are true, jobs and growth are leading us down a path we really aren't intending to go. If these numbers are true, what we really need to do is start adding in, we can still focus on jobs and growth, but we need to start adding in a measure of what are we doing either for the people, but this makes it look more like it's what are we doing to the people. Now, I understand the arguments, but this is so pronounced. Frankly, I was shocked at the extremes. And I'll leave them in your box, but I would ask you to take a look at them. And I would ask you, most of you obviously weren't here in the last 10 years, but if you want to set a new time and a new standard and a new measure for what could really put Fremont back on the map, I would urge you to start including a measure in addition to jobs and growth. What's happening to Fremont's people? Again, if this is true, we're on a downward slope that we don't want to be on, and another 10 years is going to make a dramatic difference in what that looks like. So thank you.
Time is now 6:50. We have 10 more minutes of open public comment. the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Time is now 7 p.m. We will call the city council regular meeting of April 27 to order. The Opens Meeting Act is posted on the rear wall next to the agendas. At this time, we'll have roll call.
Please cast your vote for roll call. 8 council members are present, Mayor.
Thank you. Next on the agenda is mayor's comments. I do have multiple service awards tonight to give out. First is Tim Voss, 30 years of service. Tim was hired in 1991 as a fuel handler for the power plant. Next is Tracy Parr, 5 years of service. Tracy was hired in 2016 as a senior office associate for the library. And Zachary Swan, 5 years of service. Zach was hired in 2016 as a maintenance worker too for the street department. And then Marty Gifford, he is going to be leaving the planning commission. He's moving outside of town. So he was involved with the planning commission from 2015 to 2021. And then finally, Dean Cavan, 25 years of service. Dean was hired in 1996 as a power plant statistical tech. In 2005, Dean was promoted to store supervisor. Dean, you want to come on up and accept your award. Congratulations. Thank you very much. Congratulations to all service award recipients. Next on the agenda would be item 1. Motion to adopt current agenda for the April 27, 2021 regular meeting. Are there any changes to the agenda from staff, council? I do have a change in regards to items 16 and 17. There was a request by staff just based on Olson getting back to them with the revised preliminary plat based on the grading plan, and the drainage was not ready to go tonight. So we are, I would entertain a motion to continue items 16 and 17 to the May 11th meeting. Councilman Jensen.
I'll make that motion.
Councilman Ligman.
I'll second that.
Cast your votes.
Motion carries 8-0, Mayor.
Are there any other changes to the agenda before we vote on the full agenda? Now I need a motion to adopt the current agenda as amended. Councilman Gibson,
I would make that motion to accept the current agenda.
Councilman Yerger. Cast your votes.
Motion carries 8-0, Mayor.
Moving on to consent agenda. All items in the consent agenda are considered to be routine by the city council and will be enacted by one motion. There will be no separate discussion on these items unless a council member or a citizen so requests, in which event the item will be removed from the consent agenda and considered separately. Are there any items to be removed from staff, council, or the public? Councilman Gibson?
No,
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Councilman Yerger?
I'd like discussion on items 7 and 8, please.
Okay, all right. Okay, 5 staff requests for item 5.
Susan Jacobus, 1805 North D. There are some minor changes needed on item number 3.
There any other changes? Seeing none, I would take a motion to approve consent agenda items 2, 4, 6, 9, and 10. Councilman Jensen,
I'll make the motion to approve consent agenda items 2, 4, 6, 9, and 10.
Councilman Coons, cast your votes.
Motion carries 8-0, Mayor.
Now moving on to item 3, dispense with and approve April 13th, 2021 City Council and Special City Council meeting minutes. Is there any report from staff on this?
No report.
Report, okay. Go ahead.
Susan Jacobus, 1805 North D Street, Fremont. The issue.
Before you begin, we'll go
Yes.
ahead and open public comment.
Oh, crap.
Go ahead.
Sorry.
Go
Is
ahead.
it open? Okay. On number 9, Cats Angels is with a C. That's a minor change, but what was awarded was 4,000 to Cats Angels and 4,500 to Bergen. So that wasn't a $8,000 split. It was an $8,500 split. So Bergen was awarded 4,500 and Cats was given 4. And that was all that I had on that.
Thank you. Does this need to be amended?
Take a look and see how it reads right now, and I'll read that and see what we.
Are there any other comments from the public? Seeing none, any comments from council?
So what I have on the minutes is motion made by Jensen, seconded by Yerger to amend the resolution to provide $4,000 to Cats Angels with a K and reduce the Archbishop Bergen Catholic Award by 4,000. And so there's what it went from 85 to 4,500. And then Cats would have received that $4,000 that Bergen Catholic was reduced by.
So is it correct as presented? Okay. 4,500. Okay. Is there any comment from council? If there's none, as presented, looks like it's correct in regards to the math here.
Except perhaps the spelling if it was with a C. instead of
Okay.
a K. Okay.
We can change that. Any comments from council? If not, I would just take a motion to dispense and approve April 13, 2021 City Council and Special City Council meeting minutes, and we'll make the Cats into a C. Councilman Legman,
I make a motion to dispense with and approve the April 13th.
Councilman Gibson,
I'll second that motion.
cast your votes.
Motion carries 8-0, Mayor.
Moving on to item 5, resolution 2021-061, approving the change order to contract for purchase of substation H control house with Siemens Industry. This time we'll have staff report.
Troy Shaven, Assistant City Administrator, Utilities. The reason I pulled this was because between the time Utility Infrastructure Board approved the change order last week and today, our engineering department went through the change order. It's based on, we have 2 contracts going simultaneously, and it's basically based on termination ends needed for our SCADA system. They were able to modify the SCADA system with no charge and lower the price on this change order. And so it actually lowers the change order amount from 69,870 to 63,473. And I have a revised staff report.
Okay, I'd take a motion to receive. Councilman Legman,
I make a motion to receipt.
Councilman Jensen,
I'll second.
cast your votes to receive updated staff report.
Motion carries 8-0, Mayor.
Thank you, Troy. Any questions for staff on this? And it says it right here in the staff report, going from 69,870 to 63,473. Are there any comments from the public? Seeing none, any comments from council? Councilman Yerger?
Since you're not handing out copies of resolution 2021-061, I'm assuming the two changes are only to the values posted, going to 63,473. All the other wording is the same.
Yes.
That's correct. Do we need to amend this then? Okay. I would take a motion to amend this resolution to reflect the 63,473. Councilman Coons,
Make a motion, amend the approved resolution 2021-061.
Councilman Yerger,
Were you taking a motion to make the amendment or to approve the amended motion? Did I hear you?
to make the amendment, and then we'll go back and
Is that,
approve.
is that what you did, Mike? Then I would second the motion to amend.
Please vote.
Motion carries 8-0, Mayor.
Now I would take a motion in regards to amended resolution 2021-061. Councilman Coons,
Make a motion to approve amend motion 2021-061.
Councilman Gibson,
I'll second that.
cast your votes.
Motion carries 8-0, Mayor.
Thank you.
Moving on to item 7, motion to approve liquor license locations change for Taco Smack, 245 East Fifth Street. This time we'll have staff report. Go ahead, Tyler.
Mayor and council, I received this application for a location change from the state of Nebraska. There's not any kind of notification or hearing requirement for this kind of change. I spoke to the police department, and typically when there's a new application, we would provide a report from planning department and the police department. Because this is a current holder, I didn't have the police department create a report, since they did that previously when it was first approved, but I did have the planning department include their report, since it is a new location, and they were on board with that recommendation or for the approval of the license location change. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Councilman Yerger.
I have a few questions about the application. I don't have it up on screen, but on Form 111 that was included in our packet, which is the application for change that's got the Nebraska Liquor Control Commission stamp on it. On the second page of that document under item 2, it says the lease agreement expires on January 3rd, 2030. Yet the lease agreement that's attached to our paperwork indicates that the lease agreement expires in August of 2027. That doesn't seem to be consistent. Also in item 3 in this application, it indicates that the new premise location is not within 150 feet of the church. That is, the no box has been indicated. However, later in the staff report package, in the communication under the liquor application report prepared by the planning department, it specifically states that this property is across the street to the east of the church, which is within 150 feet of the proposed business. And so with that backdrop, I have a question as to whether or not this application has all the requisite paperwork and needs to be corrected before it's approved for the items that I just raised. And in particular, since they are within the 150-foot limit, not with their original permit at their old location, but where they are going in their new location, I'm questioning whether or not Nebraska statute 53-177 sub 1 which requires a Form 134 to be filed with the state, should be part of our packet and completion before a hearing is held on this application. My understanding of that state statute is that notice has to be given to the associated church. They have an opportunity to raise question or have a hearing. And I don't know from anything that we've been provided that that's occurred. And so I don't know whether the church got notice or not, but since they are within 150 feet under state statute, it would appear to me that this is premature until we straighten out the paperwork. And I'd ask Jennifer or staff if they're, or Tyler, if you concur in those requirements, because originally where they're currently located would not have been across from a church, but this one clearly is.
So I would need to reorient myself with the specifics of that state statute, but I know for a property that I think it was downtown next to a church, they provided a letter, and I don't believe there was any kind of formal hearing that was held in that situation. When they issue a liquor license from the state, I understand there's an inconsistency on the dates for the length of the lease. I know that the state requires the person with the liquor license on an annual basis to provide a copy of a current lease. And so maybe that would assuage the concern there. I understand there's an inconsistency, but that would be between the state and the applicant. But I will make sure I bring that up to the state when I speak to them about this application.
Travis?
Yeah, and Tyler, I think you're right about the lease issue. That one is if the applicant is on right now, maybe they could clear that one up, but I don't see the form required by statute. I don't know if the applicant reached out to the church at all. If the applicant's on, maybe that could be a way to remedy this. Other than that, if they're not, or if there's no other explanation, I would recommend continuing it to the next meeting.
Is the applicant on Zoom? Okay. Before we go any farther, are there any comments from the public?
Thank you for asking. Susan Jacobus, 1805 North D Street. This proposed establishment is directly across from St. James Episcopal Church. The vestry has not been notified as such, and pursuant to state statute 53-177, sale or retail bottle club license restrictions. Except as otherwise provided in this section, no license shall be issued for the sale at retail of any alcohol, liquor for a bottle club within 150 feet of any church, school, hospital, etc. And also, there is a form that has not been given with this application. And that form is in their requirement as part of their application. So that was not also considered. So pursuant to state statute 53-177, they do have to provide that. They have to provide the form. The church has not been notified. And based on that, if you're going to table this or continue this, maybe they'll get their act together on this, but this is inadequate and improper notice.
Any other comments from the public? Comments from council, Councilman Coons? Councilman Yerger.
Well, we were just cited as a section of 53-177, and I guess while I think this really should be continued, and I'll do that, but I think the more relevant paragraph actually in this particular case might be paragraph 2 of that same statute that says a license may be issued if the commission gives notice to the affected church. And if that's happened, great. If it hasn't happened, it needs to happen. And then a hearing may be prescribed. That may or may not happen, but I don't think we've necessarily gone down that road either way. So it does seem to me that we need to affect paragraph 2. That's really something the state will pick up, but they have to clear up their application to indicate to the state their new location is really within the 150-foot. And that will trigger this necessary paperwork that we should have in front of us. And if it clears, then there's no problem. But if it doesn't clear, then we have an issue. Is that correct? Legal?
Yeah, I would agree. There's no indication before the council today that the church was notified. So, and that is a statutory problem.
Okay. I would recommend then, if there are no other comments from other council members, that we continue this item to the next meeting. Hopefully that's enough time for them to clean up their paperwork and bring this back. Is that going to be enough time, do you think, council? 2 weeks?
Depending on what the church says, that should be enough. Yep.
So I'll make that a motion. Continue to the next meeting.
I happen to go to that church. I've been there for 35 years. They haven't been notified because we won't have any problem, but if you'd like to stay that till next meeting, I'll make darn sure that we notify our folks. Actually, I've been there 52 years, so I'm sure they have no problem with that. The place on the north side also serves liquor, and they've been in business for a couple of years, so I think it's just the paperwork needs to be filled out.
Councilman Sukram.
There's no other comment. I was going to second it.
Okay. Councilwoman Ganem. Okay. Motion to continue to May 11th, next meeting. Okay. Cast your votes.
Motion carries 7-1, Mayor.
Moving on to item 8. Motion to approve addendum to real estate purchase agreement dated January 12th, 2021 with McGinn Holdings LLC to extend due diligence period an additional 90 days. This time we'll have staff report.
Mayor and City Council, Brian Newton, City Administrator. This applies to McGinn Holdings' first purchase. It's the first 4.5 acres that we approved back in, I think it was the end of the year, December, I believe, that we actually approved this, gave 120-day due diligence. Since that time, though, he's purchased 2 more lots just adjacent. And on tonight's agenda, he has a third purchase because he can see the tea leaves that it won't get the floor area ratio changed. And so he's proposing to buy another lot so he can still build his large building that he wants to build on this site. So in other words, he just needs more time so we can get all 3 purchases wrapped up so we can close all at once.
Any questions for staff? Councilman Yerger.
In your discussion with the purchaser, even though I know the execute date wasn't until January 12th, which was almost, well, actually it was a month later than the original action by council, which was on December 8th. I'm curious as to whether or not due diligence of any kind has been done between at least January 12th, if not December 8th, until now or not. That's my first question. Have they given any indication to the city that they've done any due diligence work whatsoever since December 8th or January 12th?
And remember, on December 8th, we have to publish it for 30 days. So we couldn't close until after 30 days of publishing. So that's why the delay in closing or until he started on, or that's why he signed it on January 12th. Yes, since then he's done geotechnical. He called today. He's got architectural plans on the first phase that he's got drawn. So he's moving along.
Okay, thank you for that. Personally, I have to say, when I'm doing some research on this, it looks like due diligence on most properties is, a couple of weeks. For commercial properties, it could extend from 30 to 60 days. I've even gotten some input that says maybe it could go even longer than that. If it's a complex matter, whatever, it could maybe go up to even 180 days. We're at 7 months, 210 days with this extension, which seems to me to be like over the top for tying up property for that length of period. And I know it's been an iterative process. That's not our fault. The contract gave 120 days initially, which was pretty generous, but expanding it to 7 months due diligence, only to perhaps find after 7 months that we're not going to sell the property to them. That's what this period's for. That seems to be tying up our property for quite some time. This is at least one corner lot, fairly significant area. I'm particularly uncomfortable with the granting of an extra period that extends for that many months.
Any other questions for staff?
Why
Ca-
does he need 90 more days?
He's buying a third lot tonight on the agenda, and he wants to make sure he gets that done, or else he's not going to move forward.
I know we would be more than generous in extending the 90 days if he does need it. Are you saying he wants to just do it all at one time?
That's correct. I mean,
Or has he done?
he's not going to build, he's not going to start anything until he has all the land secured to do what he needs. I wouldn't.
Any other questions for staff? Councilman Jensen?
Is there anybody else chomping at the bit for this property? I mean, if we hold and give this, if we give him this, that just, it's not like we're keeping anybody sitting, waiting in the wings because we're giving this McGinnis more time, right?
I mean, we get interest weekly on lots, and so anytime we get interest, we show these as being sold or unavailable. So is there interest? There's always interest. But again, he's serious. I mean, like you said, he's done work there and he fully intends to move forward. He was just kind of hoping that we change the floor area ratio, and he sees that we won't. He's got to go back and buy more property.
Any other questions for staff? Any comments from the public? Yes, on Zoom. Go ahead.
Oh, just a minute, turn him on. Oh, there's Dave Mitchell. There you go. Go ahead, Dave.
Thank you. Here on behalf of Seth,
Yeah, Dave, just a
to
minute.
answer any questions that you might have about the extension, and I think it's been summarized quite well. This entire multi-parcel purchase is all part of one concept, one plan. And so Seth wants to make sure that all the property is secured. There's obviously going to be due diligence involved with the new lot, possible borings there as well. I say possible, but it's all a package deal, and we wouldn't be having the discussion right now if the floor area ratio allowed us to build a structure similar in size to other commercial properties. But instead of walking from the project, Seth made the decision to buy more land so that he can keep his business here in Fremont. I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Any questions for the applicant? Councilman Yerger?
Two questions. One, with regards to needing additional time because of what you just described. Something less than 90 days might be something we could entertain rather than 90 days. I'm interested also in a statement that was made at the last council meeting when we chose not to approve the UDC change. And I think the statement was, if you don't approve this, we're out. Do you recall making that statement, Mr. Mitchell?
Well, I don't know that I came here to be cross-examined tonight, Mr. Yerger, but the intention at that point in time was if we couldn't build a building there, then we were stuck. And so if we can't, instead of walking from the transaction, he's reconsidered and decided to buy another lot. My question to you is, do you want this business in town? If you don't, why don't you say so? But I don't think that's a very fair question.
Any other questions for the applicant? Thank you. Are there any comments from council? Councilwoman Ganem?
I think we approved a conditional sale, an option to buy this same property last meeting. Is this the same piece of property that we gave an option to someone else to buy, or am I?
No,
missing
that's
it.
later on the agenda, so
I know it, but
we
it
can't talk about it
ties.
here.
Any other comments from council? Councilman Yerger?
As a motion of compromise, even though I would prefer just to deny the extension outright, I'd offer to make an amendment to this to allow 45 days, which I think is generous. If you're looking to be able to tie this up because you need to buy more property, whether that happens or not, it seems to me that's going to happen within 45 days. You don't need 90 days to figure that out. So I would offer to amend this request to 45 days.
It'll take 45 days to get through 3 readings. And 30 days in the paper.
Councilman Legman?
I think he's been, Mr. McGinn's been more than willing to help and work with us. I think it's our turn to start working with him a little bit too. He's been very gracious and he's done his part. And now here's his chance to do some more due diligence and he's willing to work with us. It's our turn to work with him.
Yeah, I mean, I would second that in the fact that, last meeting, the floor area ratio wasn't approved. So instead of him leaving, he decided he's going to buy another lot. I mean, if anything, that shows how much more he is all into Fremont and having his business here. And so now we got to sell him this property. We got to go through three readings. And so, this is not unreasonable, in my opinion. Councilman Coons.
Yeah, I agree with Councilman Legband. With that being said, I'd like a motion to approve the addendum.
There is a motion to amend to 45 days. Is there a second? Councilman Ellis?
I'll second that.
Cast your votes.
Motion fails 2-6.
Councilman Coons,
Make that motion to approve the addendum.
Councilman Sukram,
I'll second that.
cast your votes.
Motion carries 6-2.
That concludes the consent. Moving on to unfinished business. Number 11, ordinance 5565, approving sale of Tech Park property to Slam Enterprises LLC, Total Fire, to build a new building for their business. This would be for final reading. We'll have staff report.
As the mayor said, this is Brian Newton, city administrator. As the mayor said, this is the final reading to Total Fire. Their legal name is Slam Enterprises. Eric Lozo, the one of the owners, is on Zoom. If you have any questions for the owner, again, this is for 3 lots in the tech park. So you will notice in the purchase agreement, we've got the legal description and the appropriate acres from Olson. So the legal has been corrected. Also, the dollar amounts have also been corrected. We've also corrected the jobs that was not done in the last meeting. So this should be good to go.
Any questions for staff? Councilman Yerger?
Don't have any questions for staff. I have a couple questions for the applicant, just to clear up in my own mind what we're building here. Well, maybe one of these is a staff question. It's not clear to me whether or not your particular business is one that requires a conditional use permit in the business park zoning. Does staff know, or maybe the applicant knows? I don't know.
No,
I'm not sure exactly if it's office and warehousing. work.
Office and warehousing and retail.
So warehousing would require a conditional use permit.
Yeah, I don't know. And Eric's on. I don't know, Eric, are you considered it warehousing or is it just operating out of that business?
It would be more of a shop, not so much not warehousing for storage or anything like that.
All right, just storage, not warehousing.
No storage. Yeah, it would literally be working out of a shop. It's yeah, we call it a warehouse. But yeah, it's just our shop that our stock is in.
I guess, and maybe that leads legal clarity, but it's not with regards to whether we approve the sale or not. I'm just curious as to whether or not it needs a conditional use permit as a follow-up to where they have to go after the fact. I am also interested in knowing for sure, just how big a building do you plan on building on 3 lots?
Am I still unmuted here?
Yep, you're good.
Okay. Well, the initial build will be on 2 of the acres. And that will be, we're figuring right now, it's actually, the architect's looking at it, but we're around 10,000 square feet, I believe, of office space and our shop area. And then on the other acre, we're talking about building maybe some, leasable commercial property, whether it be a little bit of flex space or whatnot. We're not sure what we're going to put on there yet. We're working with an architect right now to kind of figure out some ideas.
So in the anticipation, I couldn't hear, were you done speaking? I didn't mean to interrupt. So just so that I understand what you're building, if this is being eventually set across all lot, is this one building with sublease space included in it, or going to be separate buildings with some of that space be subleased in separate buildings once it's built?
Well, that we're still waiting to, like I said, to get the preliminary stuff back from the architect. Initial plans, we talked about maybe putting a couple little flex spaces on the end of our building. And we're just not sure we want to do that yet. I don't know if I want people facing on my building, so we may build a separate structure altogether. We're going to try to build the total fire building, the structure itself, on 1 acre, a little bit more, and then we'll have a little bit of outlot, obviously, and landscape area and all that. So, like I said, we're so preliminary on the design that we haven't even seen we haven't seen anything come through yet with a preliminary sketch. So.
Appreciate your transparency. Thanks. Those are the only questions I have.
Any other questions for staff or Eric? Any other comments from the public? Any other comments from council? Councilman Jensen?
I said, if there's no further comment, I'll make the motion to approve ordinance, the final reading of ordinance 5565.
Councilman Legman?
I will second that.
Cast your votes.
Motion carries 8-0, Mayor.
We'll now have final reading.
An ordinance pertaining to the sale and conveyance of real estate owned by the city of Fremont, Nebraska to Slam Enterprises LLC pursuant to Nebraska law on final reading.
Please cast your final vote.
When the FAR didn't change the last meeting. And instead he decided to buy another lot. So it shows that he invested in the community.
Motion carries 8-0, Mayor.
I said, yeah, I think it's time that we started working with, yeah.
Moving on, item 12, ordinance 5567 to amend UDC by text change to table 11-614.02 regarding fences and walls in residential districts. This would be for second reading.
Good evening,
Go ahead.
Mayor, members of the City Council, Jennifer Dam, Planning Director. This is a request by Karen and Matt Wewell to amend the UDC regarding fencing that abuts on corner lots that abut arterial streets. They would like to put a fence up on their corner lot, and the change that is proposed is under the exception language, which allows a fence or wall to be built within a required street yard of a lot abutting an arterial street, including street yards on corner lots and rear lots of double frontage lots, to a height of 6 feet, so long as, and this is the language that's proposed to be inserted, vision clearance is provided if access to the property, and then strikes not taken from the same arterial street. It addresses the safety concerns regarding vision clearance on those corner lots where there would be driveways. Staff and the Planning Commission have recommended approval.
Thank you, Jennifer. Any questions for Jennifer? Councilman Yurger?
I have a question that it's kind of on this one, but interactive with something that we have later. We've had this discussion previously, and I want to ask before we get into changing the UDC on this issue, can the council grant waivers for fencing? I mean, we're changing the UDC, I understand. But could we have handled this with a waiver change?
No, there's not the language in the UDC that allows that
No language in the UDC to allow waivers,
in this specific instance.
just for fences.
Right, it.
But
the
for some things in the
language-
UDC, the council can grant waivers.
Correct, right. There's language in the UDC for certain things where waivers can be granted.
Okay. Does section 8 of Fremont's municipal code have any bearing on what we're doing here or just the UDC? Because section 8 addresses obstructions and fences, regulations, et cetera, in residential districts, et cetera. And in section 8607, it says the council by resolution may prescribe a specific case variance in the application of this section if it's found that said variance would not be injurious to the public health, safety, and welfare of the city. And so even though the UDC says there may be certain cases where we can do waivers, in this particular section of Fremont Municipal Code, it looks like council has by resolution the option of granting this by waiver. And I'm asking, why doesn't section 8 of municipal code have any bearing on what we're discussing?
I don't know the details of that specific section. Could you give me the citation again? And I would
Section
certainly.
8, 606 and 607. The bottom paragraph of 606 says the council may grant permission for a fence to exceed 6 feet, blah, blah, if it's not detrimental to the safety. And then 607 goes on in the next to the, or in the last sentence, that we can by resolution prescribe some specific adjustment. And
I
the
would-
reason that I'm asking that, Jennifer, is one of these things where when we change UDC code, it applies across the entire city.
Of course,
And
right.
so I'm looking for whether or not there are means to the council where we don't have to do that, that we can be specific. And if this is one of those cases, because not that this might not be a good UDC change for the entire city, we wouldn't have to do it if in fact we just wanted to grant a waiver and it was permissible. So that's why I'm asking.
Sure, I understand. I would have to review those specific sections. Since this is an ordinance, it does require 3 readings. So if it's okay with the council and the mayor, I would get back to you on that at the next meeting. So, and talk with our attorney.
That's fine.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other questions for staff? Thank you, Jennifer. Any comments from the public? Any comments from council? Seeing none, I take a motion to hold second reading, 5567. Councilman Legban,
I will make that motion to hold second reading.
Councilman Coons,
I'll second the motion.
cast your votes.
Motion carries 8-0, Mayor. No. do final reading.
We'll now have second reading.
An ordinance of the city of Fremont, Nebraska, amending Exhibit B of Ordinance 5427, specifically portions of the UDC Chapter 11, zoning, subdivision, and site development, Exhibit B, providing for repeal of ordinances in conflict herewith, providing for severability, and providing an effective date on second reading.
Thank you, Tyler. Moving on now to new business, item 13. Move to confirm appointment of Melanie Martinez as police officer per mayor recommendation. Got a chance to review and am proud to present Melanie Martinez to council tonight. Melanie, would you be willing to share a little bit just about yourself and excited to have you here today?
Hi, okay, so my name is Melanie Martinez. I'm currently a correction officer down in Lincoln. Where do I start? I'll be your female. I'm excited. This is ever since I was little. I have a picture when I was little. I wanted to be an officer. I'm excited. I'm really thankful for the opportunity. I'll be I believe, the only bilingual officer in the department. as well as being female and everything going on. I'm super excited to help out the minority community and getting to know the rest of the community. So I'm super thankful.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. I would take a motion to approve. Councilwoman Ganem.
I move that we confirm Melanie Martinez as police officer for Fremont, Nebraska. Welcome.
Councilman Coons.
I'll second that motion.
Cast your votes.
Motion carries 7-1. Was that, did you intend to?
Oh,
Yes, okay.
okay.
Sorry about that. It's 8-0.
Sorry, wrong button.
8-0. Mark, congratulations. Welcome to Fremont. Moving on to item 14. Resolution 2021-063 to approve the Blue Stem Commons replat 2, a replat of lots 1 through 12, block 5, Blue Stem Commons, generally located at 36th Street and Little Blue Stem Road. This time we'll have staff report.
Good evening, Mayor, members of the council, Jennifer Dam, Planning Director. This is a request to replat this particular block to reduce the number of lots from 12 to 10. So overall, it reduces the density in the entire PUD. The reason that they are doing this is to allow some wider lots so that they can build ranch style units. This is allowed in the PUD because we're reducing the density. You will see at the next meeting a request to amend the PUD that's really unrelated to this. And that what will be coming forward addresses having detached single family as well as attached single family houses on the lots that have originally been planned for duplexes. So that's coming forward, but this particular one just relates to reducing the density and making a couple of those lots a little bit bigger. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for staff? Councilman Yerger.
So do you consider this an upgrade in the type of housing that's being put into the subdivision by reducing the density and expanding the footprint of the buildings that they're going to be building?
Yeah, it's increasing the sizes of the lots. I'm not sure how the total square footage of the building is going to be impacted. I would imagine, a ranch style house generally has a larger footprint than a 2-story building would. But in terms of total square footage of each unit, I don't know exactly what that would be, but it is overall reducing the density by 2 units.
Well, I guess what I was thinking is if you're doing single family attached or detached versus duplex property or whatever, and making yourself a smaller footprint relative to the, not size wise, but increasing the footprint of those particular offerings, that's probably an enhancement.
I think so. And we've seen the same thing over in Gallery 23, where they have increased the size of those 4-plex lots so that they could have some ranch style houses on the ends. It's really being driven by the market.
Yeah, and they did the same thing over there, as I recall, because people wanted single story rather than
Correct.
multi-level, and that was what they were doing as well.
Right, right.
Thank you.
Any other questions for staff? Thank you, Jennifer. Any comments from the public? Any comments from council? Councilman Yerger.
I'd like for the resolution to be amended to reflect the planning commission's vote, if at all possible. We've been striving to put the planning commission's recommendation, the date of their meeting, and their vote count so that we at least know how many members were present and what their vote counts were. This one doesn't reflect the vote count. Just wonder if we could amend that to include that, please.
Is there a second to amend to include the vote count from the Planning Commission? Councilman Ellis. Cast your votes.
Motion carries 7-1, Mayor.
I would now take a motion to approve amended resolution 2021-063. Councilman Yurger.
Yes, I'd make a motion to approve amended resolution 2021-063.
Councilwoman Ganem,
Second the motion.
cast your votes.
Motion carries 8-0, Mayor.
Moving on now to item 15, ordinance 5569 pertaining to pay plan for officers and employees of the Department of Utilities. This would be for first reading. We'll have staff report.
Honorable Mayor and City Council, Jennifer McDuffie, Human Resources Director. As the staff report indicates, we have a retirement of an employee coming up, and like we do for every position when it's vacated, we look at it to determine what our future and current needs are and if the current position fits those needs. When we took a look at the position that's coming up, it was very obvious that we are going to be moving, or that we need to move from hand-drawn maps to the GIS system. So what we've put together is an actual GIS position that would be responsible for the entire GIS system for all city entities on both the utility and the city side. And so we've developed this position. It's a completely different skill sets, would require different classification than the ones that we have now. So we've put the classification together, had the consultant take a look at it to give us an idea of what a comparable wage would be. And based on that information, our recommendation was to put it at a pay grade of 24.5, which would be competitive with market value for this position. So we have the updated salary ordinance in front of you tonight, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Any questions for staff? Councilman Yurger.
I see the insertion in the ordinance for the new pay position. I'm curious as to, are the prior positions, or those holding the current positions that do manual mapping or whatever, are they in this pay chart, or are they being eliminated?
They are in the current, my apologies, they are in the current pay chart because the individual that is in there has not retired yet. However, because of the GIS process, and Brian may be able to explain a little bit better than I can, but because of what we need to do in order to get the GIS system set up, we do need to get someone into this position as quickly as we can before the other individual leaves.
Jennifer, my real question was, where are we going from? That is, what pay scale on the manual mapping salary schedule were we on? You know, what was the pay grade and salary schedule there, knowing that this is completely different? And if those still remain, where was the old pay scale for manual mapping? Under what pay grade?
I believe it's a 26.5 is what the current position is.
Oh, it's higher than the GIS?
Does that sound correct, Brian? Or was it the,
I think it's 2 steps below, wasn't it?
let me look. I probably, oh no, I believe it's the 22. It was a pay grade 22. My apologies.
Thank you.
Any other questions for staff? Any comments from the public? Any comments from council? If there are none, I'd take a motion to introduce and hold first reading of ordinance 5569. Councilman Jensen.
Yeah, I'll make the motion to hold first reading of ordinance 5569.
Councilman Legman.
No, second that.
Cast your votes.
Motion carries 8-0, Mayor.
We'll now have first reading.
An ordinance of the city of Fremont, Nebraska pertaining to pay plan for officers and employees, repealing ordinance number 5501 and all other ordinances and parts of ordinances in conflict herewith, providing for publication in pamphlet form and providing an effective date on first reading.
Now moving on to item 18. Ordinance 5570 pertaining to the sale and conveyance of real estate owned by the city of Fremont, Fremont Technology Park to McGinn Holdings LLC pursuant to Nebraska law. This would be to introduce and hold first reading. We'll have staff report.
Mayor, City Council, Brian Newton, City Administrator. As we talked earlier, this is the lot that you approved the option on at last meeting. However, I called Mr. Lavender and said, hey, listen, we had somebody that was interested in buying this lot. You have first right of refusal, although we hadn't signed the agreement, nor had he. You just approved it is all. And he asked who it was, and I told him it was Mr. McGinn. And he said, oh, that's fine. He can have it. He has better use for it than what I need. And so he is not willing to exercise his first refusal, and he's willing to let McGinn buy this. So tonight, what you have before you is a draft purchase agreement. Again, we don't have the legal description, so that's still blank. We'll get that before the third reading. So.
Any questions for staff? Councilman Yerger.
So this is a question really for a legal to start with, since the agreement that we approved with Lavender for the option had a section in it with regards to notice, which I understand the city administrator said he gave verbal notice. And there's a 30-day option period that's allowed by that. And is oral waiver satisfactory, or do we have to have that in writing because he has an agreement?
Well, certainly I would like the waiver, quote unquote, to be in, even an email would suffice, but I don't think the agreement's been signed yet. The option hasn't been signed. So I think the city is
So
shielded.
we have no obligations, so let me know for the option.
Correct.
Okay. With regards to the terms of this sale, I understand the request is to incorporate the terms and conditions of the original purchase agreement. So the first 4 acres of purchase are the terms and conditions being sought. Is that correct?
Yeah, I just used the same agreement that we've used 2 previous times.
So I have some questions and concerns about that. This property is not located on 29th Street.
That's correct.
So paragraph 20 with specifics about infrastructure related to 29th Street are no longer applicable on this purchase, it would seem, because not on 29th Street. So I think paragraph 20 should be stricken, not followed in repeat of the original agreement. In addition to that, paragraph 21 in that regard is in no other contracts currently being offered by the city. And I would offer that we should strike that as well. Then thirdly, we have migrated to where we are only offering, I thought, $7,500 worth of rebate, not $12,192 or whatever, which was in the original agreement by in Mr. McGinn's purchase. And I understood at the last meeting that was where presentation was given that we were in a 3-phase process where we started out giving incentive to make initial purchase. Now we've gone, I think was the terminology, to phase 2, 7,500, with the intent that we're going to go to phase 3. And hopefully, in my mind, that would mean not giving any. But at this juncture, we are at the $7,500 level. So I'm wondering, why are we offering terms on this purchase that are different from those that we just offered to Slam, for example, or to Lavender originally in his purchase, and or some of the others, I guess Slam in specific with regards to the 7,500, but with regards to Lavender and the daycare, as to not having provisions for paragraph 20 for infrastructure included in their provisions. I don't think it's appropriate that we backtrack and pick up all those provisions in this additional request for purchase. And I'm interested why we did that.
This is his 3rd time coming back. I didn't think it was right to charge him more than what he's already paid for the last 2 times.
So if he comes back a year or 2, or somebody else comes back down the road, they're going to get their same deal?
This is the 3rd time he's came back simply because he's gracious enough to come back. So I think it's fair that he gets the same price.
Okay, well, my understanding was that the last meeting, you and the LB 840 director said we had moved to a new phase, and this is not it. I'm also interested in understanding whether or not in making an additional purchase, this becomes one big lot. That is 4 in the original, 2 in the second, and now a 7th. When this is configured, is this one big lot or 7 individual lots?
So right now he has 2 lots, the 4.5 acres and the 2.2 acres. So he has 2 lots. He's currently has 3 phases of building growth. If he does want to build his 3rd phase, he will have to combine all 3 in order to get him to fulfill the floor area ratio.
Well, I understood either from staff report or someplace that the building size is 120,000 square feet, which would require the 7 lot square footage in order to qualify.
Yep. That's
How is
his
the 7th
final-
lot, how's
that's
the
his
7th
3rd
lot to
phase.
be incorporated?
That's his 3rd phase of building built.
We'll have a building on the 7th lot.
I don't know if he will or not. He needs it for the ratio, that's for sure. But he doesn't necessarily have to build it on there. If you look at that lot that sticks around the corner there, it's not really conducive to build on. It's more just because he has to meet the floor ratio. But he'll have to combine all, so 4, 5, 6, he'll have to combine all 7 lots to build his 3rd phase. Otherwise, he won't have enough square footage for his 120,000 square foot building.
Yeah, you answered my question. That's where I was driving. I would ask legal then one last question if I'm permitted. I know I'm over time. Just one question for legal.
Quickly.
If you don't build on the 7th lot, is that lot, and that lot is not consolidated as part of the overall building project, formally going to the assessor, is that lot subject to sale because it doesn't have a building on it?
Subject to sale.
Down the road, if you want to resell that lot down the road, can you?
As an individual property owner, I don't see why not, but
After it's been used to meet the FAR test for building on the other lots, which
Well, I
is
think that
not
would-
meetable today.
that would create an issue of conformance with the UDC, and that would be a bigger issue, I think, for the owner at the time. You
Okay.
can't obfuscate your requirements under the UDC by manipulating lots and playing games like that.
Thank you.
Any other questions for staff? Councilman Ellis.
Question for legal. Does this set us up for any liabilities when selling a property cheaper than we just sold to somebody else? Is there any?
As far as discriminatory intent, no, it does not.
There is no, somebody couldn't come back and say, why did he get that price and I got this?
They could, if there was a basis for reasons, or there wasn't a basis for reasons to negotiate an agreement as they did.
Any comments from the public?
Susan Jacobus, 1805 North D Street, Fremont, Nebraska. The comment I had in here is the 180 days. You just extended the one property. I don't think he needs another 180 days on this. I think you need to minimize this so everything's done all at the same time. So I'm not sure why we just do a blanket duplication of the original contract. And I appreciate the comments by Councilman Yerger in regards to paragraph 20 and 21. However, that contingency period of 180 days need to be a little less lengthy. You just gave him another 90 on the other to 210, which the city has never done on property. It's always been a max of 180. But on this one, he doesn't need that 180 days since he's trying to have everything closed up within the next 90 days.
Mr. Mitchell on Zoom.
Just a few quick points. Under paragraph 9 of the contract, we have 120 days, not 180 days. So this contract dovetails the other contracts. On paragraph 20, since this lot is part of a total package, we want those same contingencies to apply with respect to this transaction, because if those contingencies don't are not met with respect to the other lots, we don't want to be stuck with this lot on a dirt road that we have no use for, except as part of a larger package. And paragraph 21 simply just preserves our options with respect to economic development. As I've indicated in prior meetings, in all likelihood, Seth is not going to be seeking economic development incentives, but he wants that opportunity. And the fact that none of the other buyers have sought that type of protection in the contract shouldn't be held against us. We're just doing the same things that we've done in every other type of building development contract. And as I've also indicated in other meetings, this is the same agreement that we use to develop 23rd and Jaeger Road with the hotel and Buffalo Wild Wings and the urgent care center. So this is very common language for more complex development agreements and nothing out of the ordinary.
Thank you. Any comments from council? Councilman Yerger.
I'd like to make two motions to amend. That is, I'd like to have them handled separately. I'd like one amendment to be to delete paragraphs 20 and 21. And supplement to that amendment, I'd like to change paragraph 3 to $7,500 of credit to match the most recent sales that we've been doing now that we've migrated to stage 2. And I like those taken in sequence. So it's an amendment to my own amendment, if that's possible.
Legal.
There's a motion.
Just vote on one at a time. Unless there's any privilege motions, that shouldn't be a problem.
Okay, I would make a motion to amend the resolution to fix and delete paragraphs 20 and 21.
Before I get to that, I mean, are there any other comments from council? Councilman Legban?
Yes, I have to agree with
Great, can you turn off, please?
Mr. Mitchell said what he wanted, and it's only fair. Now, all of a sudden, we're going to penalize him for helping us out by buying another lot. Now you want to penalize him. I just don't understand it. So I do not agree with Mr. Yerger right now. I would have to agree with Mr. McGinn's legal team. I think we're setting ourselves up for some ramifications if we start penalizing him.
I guess I'll just go back to what I mentioned previously. I mean, Mr. McGann is working with us on this. I mean, he was one of the first after Simply Strong to inquire about the Fremont Technology Park. And, you know, I don't want to rehash this again, but, you know, we sat on this ground for 10 years. And so, you know, how hard we're making it for a Fremont success story, like, you know, like Can Cooker, to help and comply with the city. You know, that's where I think, you know, some of these changes I don't think are appropriate. But that's my 2 cents. There's a motion. If there's any other comments from council. We'll take them one at a time then. There's a motion to.
If you let me speak, I'll have a comment.
Go ahead.
I'll withdraw my motions to amend for first reading to give council an opportunity to think about their obligations, I think, relative to not just to Mr. McGinn and to his business, but to the citizens of Fremont. We have an obligation to represent the citizens of Fremont, and we are selling these lots at a considerable loss, of which the staff said we're going to migrate to where we're not doing that. And now we're retreating so that we can do something in retrospect. I just ask you to think about that. But in the meantime, you know, we can move on with first reading if you'd like. I'll withdraw my motions and save them for another day. I would suggest, though, that I make a motion then to amend the section 3 of the resolution language itself. In section 3 of the agreement, or the resolution, excuse me, it states that this sale is for Brian Levener. He is not buying this property. So if you take a look at Your packet material, the resolution itself. In section 3 of ordinance 5570, the last sentence of the bold paragraph before you get to subparagraph A. This is the sale of subject real estate to Brian Levener is subject to the following stipulations, and that's the wrong party. So at least
We'll
we
fix
need,
that
to
by
at
the
least
next
we
one.
need to
That's-
amend.
Yeah, I
That's
think I
Tyler's cut and
wrote
paste.
that. I will correct that. I
We need to
apologize.
amend the ordinance.
A motion to amend. Is there a second? Councilman Ellis,
Second that.
cast your votes.
Motion carries 6-2.
Now I would take a motion to ordinance 5570 as amended to introduce and hold first reading. Councilman Jensen,
I'll make the motion, introduce and hold first reading, motion 5570.
Councilman Gibson,
I'll second that motion.
cast your votes.
Motion carries 7-1.
Ready?
Yeah.
We'll now have first reading.
An ordinance pertaining to the sale and conveyance of real estate owned by the city of Fremont, Nebraska to McGinn Holdings LLC pursuant to Nebraska law on first reading.
Moving on, item 19, the tax increment financing annual report to council. Is Jody ready? Go ahead, Jody.
There she is. You're muted. There you go.
All right. Can you hear me all right?
Yes,
Okay. So annually, we're required to present this report to council. All you need to do is receive and file it. But there are specific items that are required in the statute. You see the first seven items listed, those are the ones that were required. And then additionally, the city council had asked in the past to add the number of years remaining. Those numbers that you see listed in my staff report correspond to the numbers that you see on the second page at the bottom, the column that represents. For example, over in the far left, number 1, that is the number of projects. So we currently are showing 15 projects. 2 of them have been paid off in the prior year. The second item is the estimated project cost, and then the projected valuation. We get those from the redevelopment agreements that were presented. And then we do a comparison of the excess or rather the, excuse me, if it's an excess or if it's less than what was expected. That's in column 3. Again, I'm looking across the bottom. Kind of the headline from this report for you is we had 2 that had rolled off, 4 new ones. They were, when I do this report, I kind of do it as a point in time in April so that from year to year, you see what we've got moving through. And the thing that I'd like to point out are those last 2 columns on the worksheet page that's at the bottom, the base valuation. So we started out with property that was valued at about $18.7 million. And through the tax increment tool, we now will, at the end of their respective 15-year process, we'll have added $173.4 million to our valuation. So that gives you kind of a snapshot of where we're at and what what tax increment financing has done for our community. 6 describes a little bit more the projects. Council has already approved those. And so you're well aware of them. And then item 7 is the percentage of the city's designated blighted and substandard area. And you'll notice that this is in acres. So right now, the percent of acres within the city limits, we're calculating at 29.1%. And then for your reference, I've included a map that shows those various areas that have been designated as blighted and substandard. And I guess I should have mentioned on the worksheet itself, there's a designation that shows, it's the 3rd column in, which redevelopment area the projects are in. So you can kind of identify them that way. The report that I had listed in my staff report was kind of interesting. I went through and picked out a few items to note. The statute says we must measure our percent by the, what do I want to say? By the acres. But there's a report that the state department, Nebraska Department of Revenue puts together. And so I took a look at some of our sister cities. And some of the information I thought was quite interesting. Fremont, for their purposes of their report, they go on a calendar year. They had Fremont down at having 9 projects, but they look at it, they measure it as a percent of our total valuation. So our percent of total valuation that's been designated as allocated for TIF has been 7.7%. And that's pretty much in the ballpark of several of our sister cities. Sioux City has a percentage of 8.75. They only have 4 projects. And the excess tax that they have not, that they're not collecting right now, but will be added to their rolls later after the 15 years is $1.45 million. Now for the city, for just our 9 projects, we have $3.3 million, and that's in tax, not valuation. That's how much, when all of these projects kind of roll through their 15-year process, the city will receive about $3 million more in property tax each year. That will go toward, that's counting the entire city levy. So the school districts will get a portion of that. The county gets a portion of that. All of the taxing authorities within our jurisdiction will share in that $3.29 million. So did anybody have any specific questions about the report itself?
Any questions for staff? Councilman Ellis.
I'm always concerned. I'm going to ask a stupid question here, but I'm going to go forward anyway. You got at the very bottom, you said there were 18 million in tax valuation for 2020, but that when these things all term out, we'll be at 173 million. Is that what you said? I just want to confirm that.
No, I don't recall saying 173 million.
Well, it's down here on the bottom, the very last column, the very bottom of the page. You said 18 million, so the tax value base for 2020 totaled 18.67697.
Yes.
No, that's the.
I apologize. Yeah, I see where you're, yes, it's an additional 173. Let
So
me
the
double
base is
check.
right Now, essentially right now.
So the base was before they.
That's the
developed.
valuation.
Land was worth before they developed.
Okay.
Now, according to the assessor, that same property is worth 173 million.
And that's total, right?
That's total for all of them.
Okay. So,
And we still get the taxes on the 18 million, yes, because you never lose the tax value on the base.
so in the last couple of meetings ago, we talked about the valuation for the total city property was 1.6 billion and it rose to 2 billion, right? So is that
Correct?
what is that based off of? Is it based off the 173?
That number would 173.
No.
That number, yes. Right, Jody?
No, it only includes
No,
the 18 million.
No, are you sure about that? Because didn't you pick up that last column from the county? What's they're currently valued at? They pay taxes on that last column. We just don't get it.
But the amount that we had certified, Brian, is what comes from the county, and they give us what the city's valuation is, and it was at $2 billion. Then they also give us the valuation for all of these TIF projects, separate and distinct from the $2 million. They're saying that our property tax request is divided by our valuation to get to our levy. So yes, the 18 million's in there, the 173 million is not.
It's not, because that's a separate calculation, because they don't want you to set
Mhm.
your levy based on that inflated value, because the 173 is not taxable. until
That's
the TIF.
that was my exact question.
Yep,
Was
you're right.
we've got a $2 billion valuation, but that wasn't really what we were taxed on, right? Because that includes these numbers, Jody, or that 2 billion has actually already been modified and brought down with the TIF.
I think. Yeah, I think.
Right. You would take the two. Sorry.
Right.
You would take the 2 billion and add the 173 million you see there.
Okay. That was my question. Thank you very much.
Mhm.
Councilman Jensen.
The combination of the two, if I am understanding your question, the total value of all of those projects would be if you added those two together.
That's eventually what comes back on the tax rolls, yeah.
Mhm.
Councilman Ellis, yeah. Any other questions for staff in regards to the TIF report? Any comments from the public? Any comments from council? Councilman Yerger,
Make a motion to receive the tax increment financing annual report.
Councilman Gibson,
I'll second that.
cast your votes.
Councilmember Gibson, I didn't get your vote. Thank you. Motion carries 8-0, Mayor.
Moving on, item 20, resolution 2021-066, approving the request of a waiver of driveway length at 904 North Locust Street. This time we'll have staff report.
Mayor, City Council, Brian Newton. David Goat again is not here this week, and so I said I would do this for him, and Jennifer's here, and I'll probably ask her to come up and talk about this as well. I think if you look at the request, they want to reorient the garage around to the side. This is just simply a request to allow them to build the garage around the back in the same alignment as their house, which means that their driveway length will be 4 feet shorter. Is that correct? 10 feet shorter than what we allow. And we have that set, so that way cars and stuff don't block the sidewalk. But in this case, if you look down the street, they haven't, there's another garage with the exact same thing. And so it's not going to be any different than what has been done. I know that doesn't make it right, but they're just simply asking to basically put the garage in alignment with their house, which means they have a shorter driveway than what we allow. And that's why the request for the waiver. Jennifer, does anything else? And the planning commission approved it.
No.
Councilwoman
Oh, I'm
Ganem.
sorry, the UIB approved it.
Yeah, this doesn't go to planning
Yeah, no,
commission.
the UIB approved it.
Right, there's two sections here from the UDC that talk about garages, detached garages being set back 20 feet, but the street side yard for that particular lot is 10 feet. My understanding is the Public Works Director has the ability to approve the waiver for the length of the driveway, and that's why it's here.
And
Councilwoman
honestly,
Ganem.
I viewed the property because she initially called me. And if they built differently, it would be out of sync with all the other neighbors that have theirs at 10 feet, 4 inches. And so by allowing this waiver, at least you'll be matching her neighbors. And it doesn't cause, they're going to use it for storage, but it wouldn't cause any other problems than what the other neighbors have.
Right, it would be in line with all of the
Mhm.
other houses in the neighborhood.
Councilman Yerger.
So I just want to be clear. So this is a detached garage. So
Uh,
they're not redoing, and it's a single car garage at this home. And they're not widening the existing garage. They're building a detached adjacent to the property.
Yes, from the site plan they provided, it looks like they are proposing to do a detached garage
Okay.
that would be in line with the house.
Okay. And I had asked earlier in the evening about, in this particular case, we can do this with a waiver. But in the other case on the fences, we had to do UDC change. And so there's specific language in the UDC that allows us to do waivers on driveways.
I don't know. I didn't initiate this request for the waiver. So I would presume there's another section that would allow the waiver. I guess we'd have to look into it and maybe get back to you at the next meeting.
I'd like to point out to both you and to legal counsel with regards to your review and inquiry, section, not UDC section, but section 8501 of municipal code. And this is the one that gives me some potential heartburn, but maybe the dimensions are fine and so we're still good. But it specifically says in that section of code, on corner lots, for any driveway to be constructed closer than 10 feet from the property lines of the adjoining streets. So we're not only talking about the front setback, we're talking about the side yard setback. And do we meet the 10-foot standard of this code? And do we care?
Yeah, and this would be considered a street side yard setback and not the front yard setback.
Right. This isn't specific in section 8. It just says the adjoining streets, of which there are 2. So we're looking at front driveway and we're looking at side yard
Right.
setback at being no less than 10 feet under this code. And I'm just wondering, does this code have any bearing? And we have to waive this code as well as
I don't know the
the other
answer
one
to
that
that.
you're investigating. And that's my question.
Any comments from the public? We have a John on Zoom.
Okay.
Please state your name and address, please.
John, you're muted.
John, if you're on, you'll have to unmute.
Okay, sorry about that. All right, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, my name is John Klein. I live at 904 North Locust Street. The reason we have the request is because we have no sidewalks in our neighborhood from Claremore all the way down until you hit Garden City Road. That's why we're asking for the variance on the sidewalk, because there is not an existing one, nor do I doubt there will ever be a sidewalk there because of all the utility boxes, light poles, existing houses that have the same driveway length. So that's kind of where we're asking for the request.
Thank you. Any other comments from the public? Are there any comments from council? Councilwoman Ganem.
If there are no other comments from council, I would like to move that we approve the request of a waiver of driveway length at 904 North Locust Street. Resolution 2021-066.
Councilman Coons,
And I'll second that motion.
cast your votes.
Motion carries 8-0, Mayor.
Now moving on to item 21, review of cash reserve policy for consideration at May 11th, 2021 meeting. This would be just a discussion item only. So we'll have a staff report.
Mayor and City Council, Brian Newton. I'll let Jody weigh in on the bulk of this, but as I mentioned a couple meetings ago, we were going to bring forward a reserve policy. This is that for your consideration. I want you to take a look at it. Jody will kind of give you an idea of how this policy relates to what our current reserves are. So you can certainly see this. The policy is just nothing more than a minimum standards. Is probably something that we wouldn't want to necessarily achieve, but at least checks the box. So when the auditors come and ask, do we have a policy? Yes. When we go out and get a bond rating, the raters, Standard & Poor's ask, do we have a policy? Yes, we have a policy. And then they compare exactly what we have in reserves against that policy. And so I think this is certainly something we need to do. And so that's the reason we're introducing this and just asking for your comments on it. And I'll let Jody weigh in. Jody.
Thank you, Brian. Jody Sanders, Director of Finance. Kind of going through this, one of the things that I wanted to point out for you is that we're talking about, particularly in the cash flow and contingency paragraph, we're talking about a minimum unassigned general fund balance. That's the line at the very bottom of your balance sheet report that you get that shows the amount that we have that it is not restricted or committed for any other purpose. So this policy really impacts the general fund the most because the rest of the funds on the governmental side are already reserved for, example, the street department, the airport, all of the different funds that we have within the city. And each of those funds has a specific purpose that it's used for. So going back to what the general fund balance, we're proposing a minimum unassigned general fund balance of 25% of the following year's revenue budget to be used for cash flow purposes. That's basically saying, you know, this is in case of unanticipated expenditures or to meet unexpected increases in service of delivery costs, but also, you know, if a pandemic were to hit and suddenly our revenues aren't what we expected them to be, there are some things that we can do, but in other ways, there are things we can't do about supplementing that additional revenue. So this would give us a little bit of a cushion. It does note that these are minimum amounts. And we typically keep more than that available. The rating agencies and GFOA both suggest a minimum of 16%. We, at the end of 2020, we're actually at 45.2% in our general fund. So we're well above the 25% for the general fund. It does go on to mention things like the special assessments fund. That's one that, you know, in a perfect world, it would be we'd receive the money on the assessments and then we would go do the work, but that's not the way a special assessment fund works. The work is done and then it's assessed back to the property. So we need to keep an appropriate cash balance just so that we can cash flow the projects. Moving on to the enterprise or utility funds, we have minimum reserve requirements that are required by the bond covenants. The bonds that you most recently approved had a covenant in there that said that we would meet a requirement of our annual net revenues derived from the combined utilities, because when we're looking at bond ratings, we are, it's a combined look at that as opposed to each individual fund, but it should be at least 1.25 times the annual debt service requirement. Our annual debt service requirement is in the neighborhood of, I believe it's not quite $7 million annually right now. And we're, based on the 2020, we actually have 3.26 times the annual debt service. We've also kind of described it in an additional way that we maintain minimum cash balances in each fund of an amount equal to 8 months of operating expenses. Or in the case, this is actually in the gas fund, 2 months of the highest monthly expenses, whichever is greater. And looking back over the past year, we're about double in almost every fund of that minimum requirement. Internal service funds, we don't have that many of them. It's almost like a repeat to say self-insurance funds. That's the employee health insurance, and then also the workers' comp. But basically, we have to make sure that we maintain a cash flow so that we make sure that we always have money available to pay the claims that are required. And then the last piece for your consideration is the uses of fund balance. What might we use that available fund balance for? And these are kind of overarching principles that just make good sense, that you don't spend your rainy day fund for ongoing operating expenditures. And again, this kind of thing is something that rating agencies look at so that they can say, well, yes, they're not going to just go willy-nilly and start spending the amount that they have set aside in their available fund balance. And then in this policy, we're also suggesting that there be an annual review, an opportunity for staff and then council to look at it and recommend any changes based on what we're seeing within the next budget cycle. And with that, I would take any questions.
Thank you, Jody. Councilman Ellis.
Jody, just a couple of questions. A couple of years ago, our auditors came back and said we had an embarrassment of riches. Where were we sitting at that time? With the
if memory serves, I think that number where now we're at 45%, it was in the 70% range.
70%? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And on the government side, what is our yearly debt service? I think you said the utility side was 7 million. What is
right
yearly debt service for the government side?
Prior to the last set of bonds being issued, it was quite low, probably in the 300,000 range, something like that, because we only had the splash station bonds that were outstanding. And so we were only making payments on those.
Now we got the auditorium and the gas tax bond.
Right. And there's a separate, you don't really look at that because those, particularly the auditorium was based on a bond issue put before the voters, where the voters said, it's okay for you to tax me enough to cover the debt and interest payments on this particular bond. So the bondholders already have that promise. There's not a bond covenant within the general obligation bonds because we've already said to the bondholders, no matter what happens, we're going to continue to tax our folks to pay that because the citizens approved it.
Okay, and that would be.
Does that make sense?
In the utility. Okay, thank you very much.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Any other questions for staff? Seeing none, is there any other discussion from council in regards to this item? If there's none, I'd take a motion to adjourn. Councilman Jensen,
I will make the motion to adjourn.
Councilman Gibson,
I will second that.
cast your votes.
Motion carries 8-0, Mayor.
We are adjourned. Thanks, everyone. Have a good evening.